The furnace in the Hendricks basement wheezed like a fading man, and I knew exactly how it felt. At 42, I'd fixed enough broken heating systems to recognize the sound of something giving up. What I didn't expect was to hear that same sound coming from my own life when I checked my phone at 11:47 p.m. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Babe, staying out late with the girls. Don't wait up. If you don't like it, find somewhere else to sleep. The text from my wife Sarah hit like a slap across the face. If I had a nickel for every time I installed a heat pump while my marriage cooled down, I'd have enough money to buy myself a decent divorce lawyer. But there I was, elbow deep in ductwork, wondering when my wife of 15 years had started talking to me like I was some random guy hitting on her at a bar. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother Derek, who bartended at the Mirage Club downtown. The message made me freeze. "Elliot, man, you need to see this. I'm sorry." The attached video showed Sarah in a tight red dress I'd never seen before, grinding against some guy in an expensive suit. Her hands were all over him, and when he spun her around, she kissed him like her life depended on it. The timestamp showed 20 minutes ago. I sat there in that musty basement, surrounded by the smell of oil and rust, watching my wife make out with a stranger while I worked my ass off to keep our business afloat. The Hendricks were probably upstairs sleeping peacefully, trusting that good old Elliot Crane would fix their heating problem. If only I could fix my own problems that easily. I recognized the guy from around town, Tommy Brennan, some hotshot car salesman who drove a BMW and wore gold chains, the kind of guy who probably never had grease under his fingernails or worked past midnight to make ends meet, the kind of guy Sarah apparently preferred to her husband. My hands were shaking as I packed up my tools. The furnace could wait until tomorrow. Hell, everything could wait until tomorrow. Right now, I needed to think. I drove to the Mirage Club and parked across the street. The neon sign cast everything in a sick pink glow, and I could hear the bass thumping from inside. At 12:30 a.m., the place was still packed with people half my age and twice as stupid. I waited and waited. At 1:15 a.m., they stumbled out together, Sarah laughing at something he whispered in her ear. She was drunk. I could tell by the way she leaned into him, the way she nearly tripped in those ridiculous heels she claimed hurt her feet whenever we went anywhere together. Tommy's BMW was parked right under a streetlight, like he wanted everyone to see his success. I watched them make out against the driver's side door for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes. Then he helped her into the passenger seat, and they drove off toward the cheap motels on Route 9. I sat in my work van for another 20 minutes, processing what I'd just witnessed. My wife of 15 years, the woman who complained about our tight budget and my long hours, was screwing around with a guy who probably spent more on cologne than I made in a week. That's when I noticed Mrs. Gibbons from our neighborhood walking her ancient poodle past the club. The old busybody had her phone out, and from the way she was looking at my van, I knew she'd spotted me. Great. By morning, half the town would know I was lurking outside a nightclub at 1 a.m. I started the engine and drove home to our empty house. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway and wouldn't be for hours. I went inside, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat at our kitchen table, staring at the pile of unpaid bills Sarah had left there like a passive-aggressive reminder of our financial problems. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was working overtime to keep us afloat, she was out spending money we didn't have on drinks and outfits to impress other men. The credit card statement from last month showed charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, at boutiques that sold dresses like the red one she'd worn tonight. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "You okay, man? I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I couldn't let you find out from someone else." I typed back, "How long has this been going on?" "Few weeks, maybe more. She's been coming in with different guys, but this Tommy guy has been regular for the past month. I'm sorry, Elliot. A month. She'd been cheating on me for a month, and I'd been too busy working to notice. Or maybe I had noticed. The new clothes, the sudden interest in going out, the way she'd started locking her phone and taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom. I finished my beer and went upstairs to our bedroom. Sarah's side of the closet was half empty, like she'd been gradually moving her favorite things somewhere else. The red dress wasn't the only outfit I didn't recognize. There were shoes, purses, jewelry, all expensive stuff we supposedly couldn't afford. At 3:47 a.m., I heard her car in the driveway. I pretended to be asleep as she crept upstairs, reeking of cigarettes and men's cologne. She slipped into bed without saying a word, probably assuming I was too tired to notice she'd been gone for 6 hours. But I noticed everything now. The way she showered immediately, the way she buried her clothes deep in the laundry hamper, the way she curled up on the far edge of the mattress like she couldn't stand to be near me. I lay there until dawn, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, and planning my next move. Sarah came downstairs at 10 a.m. wearing one of my old t-shirts and acting like nothing had happened. She made coffee and toast, humming some song I didn't recognize, while I sat at the kitchen table pretending to read the newspaper. "You're up early for a Saturday," she said, not looking at me. "Couldn't sleep. Funny thing, Derek texted me last night, said he saw you at the Mirage Club." She froze for just a second, then continued buttering her toast. "Yeah, me and the girls went out. I told you that." "Which girls? Because Derek didn't mention seeing any girls with you." Now she turned around, and I saw the flash of panic in her eyes before she covered it with anger. "Are you having your brother spy on me now? That's pathetic, Elliot." "Not as pathetic as making out with Tommy Brennan in the parking lot." The toast fell out of her hand and landed butter side down on the floor. For a moment, we just stared at each other across our kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd shared breakfast for 15 years, where we'd talked about buying a house with a bigger yard, where we'd once planned a future together. "I don't know what you think you saw," she said finally. I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. Her face went white, then red, then white again. "You're disgusting," she whispered, "having me followed, recording me like some kind of stalker." "I didn't record anything. Derek sent this to me because he thought I should know my wife was cheating on me. Silly him, right? Thinking a husband might want to know when his wife is screwing around." Sarah's whole demeanor changed. The fake innocence disappeared, replaced by something cold and mean that I'd never seen before. "You want to know the truth, Elliot? Fine. Yes, I was with Tommy. Yes, we've been seeing each other. And you know what? I don't feel bad about it." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. "How long? Does it matter? Long enough to remember what it feels like to be with a man who doesn't smell like motor oil and talk about furnace repairs at dinner. Long enough to remember what it's like to feel attractive and interesting and alive. We're married, Sarah. We took vows." She laughed, actually laughed. "Vows? When was the last time you took me anywhere nice? When was the last time you bought me something pretty, or told me I looked beautiful, or acted like I was anything more than your unpaid secretary and housekeeper? I've been working my ass off to keep this business running, to keep us from losing the house. Your business, your house, your problems. What about what I want, Elliot? What about my life? What about our life? What about the 15 years we built together? 15 years of what? Watching you come home exhausted and dirty, eating dinner in front of the TV, going to bed at 9 p.m. because you have another early service call? That's not a life. That's just existing." I stood up, and she took a step back. For a second, I thought she was afraid of me. But then I realized she was afraid of getting caught, afraid of consequences, afraid of her comfortable little double life falling apart. "So what now?" I asked. "You want a divorce?" "I want you to understand that I'm not the same person I was when we got married. I want more than this, Elliot. I want to feel like a woman, not like your business partner." And Tommy Brennan makes you feel like a woman? He makes me feel like I'm worth something, like I'm desirable and interesting and worth spending money on. When was the last time you took me to a nice restaurant, Elliot? When was the last time you bought me flowers or jewelry or anything that wasn't practical? She was right, and that made it worse. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done any of those things, but I also couldn't remember the last time she'd shown any interest in spending time with me or supported the business that paid for her car and clothes and the roof over her head. I've been working 16-hour days to keep us afloat, I said. I thought you understood that. I understood that you cared more about your work than about me. I understood that I came second to every broken furnace and leaky pipe in this town. So I found someone who puts me first. Someone who's married with 2 kids. That stopped her cold. How do you know that? Because I'm not an idiot, Sarah. Tommy Brennan has been married to Linda Brennan for 12 years. They live in that big house on Maple Street with their twin daughters. You're not his girlfriend, you're his side piece. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My cheek stung. We stood there staring at each other, both breathing hard, both realizing we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. "Get out," she whispered. "This is my house too. Get out, or I'll call the police and tell them you hit me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved for 15 years, was gone. In her place was someone capable of lying to my face, of threatening false accusations, of destroying everything we'd built together without a second thought. "Fine," I said. "I'll pack a bag and stay at Hendricks for a few days. But this isn't over, Sarah. Not by a long shot." I went upstairs and threw some clothes into a duffel bag while she stood in the doorway watching me with her arms crossed. When I came back downstairs, she was on the phone. "No, everything's fine," she was saying. "He knows, but he's leaving. We can still meet tonight." She was talking to Tommy, making plans for tonight while I was still in the house. The disrespect was breathtaking. I walked past her toward the door, then stopped. "You might want to check our joint bank account before you make any more expensive plans, and maybe think about how you're going to explain this to your sister and your parents. They always liked me better anyway." The look of panic that crossed her face told me she hadn't thought about the practical consequences of her affair. The joint accounts, the shared credit cards, the fact that half our friends were really my friends, the fact that her family had always treated me like the son they never had. I left her standing in our kitchen, phone in hand, probably realizing for the first time that her actions might have consequences beyond her immediate gratification. Derek's apartment above the bar smelled like stale beer and cigarettes, but it was better than sleeping in my van. He cleared off his couch and handed me a beer without saying much. He'd been through his own messy divorce 3 years ago, so he understood the shell-shocked feeling that comes with watching your life implode. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. Not much to say. 15 years down the drain because I wasn't exciting enough. Her loss, man. Sarah never appreciated what she had. I spent the weekend at Hendricks trying to figure out my next move. On Monday morning, I went to the bank to check our accounts. What I found made me freeze. In the past month, Sarah had spent over $3,000 on restaurants, bars, hotels, and shopping. $3,000 we didn't have, charged to credit cards that were already maxed out. She'd been financing her affair with money we needed for business expenses and house payments. The hotel charges were particularly infuriating. The Riverside Inn, the same place where we'd spent our wedding night, charged to our joint credit card 6 different times in the past month. She was literally using our money to pay for her cheating. I made copies of everything and drove to my lawyer's office. Jim Morrison had handled the paperwork when I started my business, and he'd been straight with me then. I hoped he'd be straight with me now. "Elliot, I'm sorry to hear about this," Jim said, looking over the bank statements and photos Derek had taken at the club. "But I have to ask, how do you want to handle this? Quiet and quick, or do you want to fight?" "What's the difference?" "Quiet and quick means we file no-fault divorce, Split everything 50-50 and you both walk away. Fighting means we use this evidence to show adultery and financial infidelity, which could affect alimony and property division. But it gets messy, and it gets public. I thought about Sarah's threat to call the police, about the way she'd slapped me and then acted like I was the villain. I thought about her making plans with Tommy while I was still in the house, about the $3,000 she'd stolen from our joint accounts. I want to fight. Jim nodded. Then we file first, and we file hard. I'll need you to document everything, every charge, every lie, every time she's been out when she said she was somewhere else. Can you do that? Already started. That afternoon, I went back to the house to get more clothes and some business files I needed. Sarah's car was gone, but Mrs. Gibbons was in her front yard, obviously waiting for me. Elliot, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right? I saw you at that awful club the other night, and then Sarah's been coming and going at all hours. Mrs. Gibbons was the neighborhood gossip, but she'd always been kind to me. She brought me soup when I had the flu last winter, and she always asked about my business with genuine interest. We're having some problems, Mrs. Gibbons. I'd appreciate it if you kept that between us for now. Of course, dear. But if you need anything, a home-cooked meal, someone to talk to, you know where I am. Inside the house, I could see the evidence of Sarah's double life everywhere. The expensive clothes she'd hidden in the back of her closet, the new makeup and perfume on her dresser, the way she'd rearranged our bedroom to hide the fact that we'd been sleeping on opposite sides of the bed for months. I was packing another bag when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the bedroom window, I saw Tommy's BMW pull up behind Sarah's Honda. They sat in the car for a few minutes, talking and laughing, before coming up the front walk together. The nerve of bringing him to our house, to the place where we'd built our life together, was staggering. I stayed upstairs and listened to them in the kitchen, talking about their plans for the evening like they were a normal couple instead of two cheaters using my home as their private clubhouse. This is nice, Tommy was saying. Much better than those hotels. I know. I should have brought you here weeks ago. Elliot's staying at his brother's place, so we have the whole house to ourselves. What about the neighbors? They mind their own business. Besides, everyone knows we're having problems. If anyone asks, you're just a friend helping me through a difficult time. I crept to the top of the stairs and looked down. Tommy was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking from my coffee mug, while Sarah made him a sandwich with groceries I'd paid for. The casual intimacy of it, the way he touched her hip as she worked, the way she laughed at his jokes, was worse than the video Derek had sent me. They were playing house in my house, and they didn't even have the decency to feel guilty about it. I waited until they went into the living room, then slipped down the back stairs and out through the basement, but not before I did a little reconnaissance of my own. Tommy had left his phone on the kitchen counter, and it was unlocked. I took photos of his recent calls and text messages, including several to other women who weren't his wife. Turned out Sarah wasn't Tommy's only side piece. He was cheating on his wife with at least 3 different women, maybe more. Sarah was just the latest in a long line of married women looking for excitement outside their marriages. I drove back to Derek's apartment with a plan forming in my mind. Sarah wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that I was better at games than she thought. The next morning, I called in sick to my scheduled service appointments and drove to the courthouse. Jim had already filed the divorce papers, citing adultery and financial infidelity. The process server would deliver them to Sarah at work that afternoon, in front of her co-workers at the dental office, where she'd worked for 8 years. But that was just the beginning. My next stop was the Riverside Inn, where Sarah and Tommy had been meeting. I knew the manager, Pete Kowalski, from high school. We'd played football together, and I'd fixed his restaurant's walk-in cooler last summer. Elliot, good to see you, man. What brings you by? Actually, Pete, I need a favor. My wife's been cheating on me with Tommy Brennan, and they've been using your hotel. I need copies of the registration records for my divorce lawyer. Pete's face fell. Oh, man, I'm sorry. Sarah seemed like such a nice lady. She is to people she's not married to. Can you help me out? Officially? No, I can't give you guest records. But if you happen to see the registration book lying open on my desk while I went to the bathroom, well, that's not my fault. 20 minutes later, I had photos of 6 different hotel registrations, all signed by Tommy Brennan and Sarah Crane. In 3 of them, they'd registered as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. My next stop was Tommy's car dealership. Brennan Motors was one of those flashy lots with balloons and banners promising the best deals in town. Tommy's office was in the back, behind a showroom full of overpriced sedans and SUVs. I walked in like a customer and asked to speak with Tommy about trading in my van. The receptionist called him out of his office, and I watched his face change when he recognized me. Mr. Crane, right? I think there might be some confusion. No confusion, Tommy. I know exactly who you are and what you've been doing with my wife. I just wanted to meet you face to face, man to man. The showroom went quiet. 2 other salesmen stopped talking to their customers and turned to watch. The receptionist's eyes went wide. Sir, I think you should leave, Tommy said, but his voice was shaky. I'll leave when I'm done talking. See, I've been married to Sarah for 15 years. I know all her tells, all her habits, all her little quirks, and I know she's not the only married woman you've been screwing around with. Tommy's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken of his text messages. Jennifer Martinez, Amy Chen, Lisa Rodriguez. Should I keep going? Or should we call your wife Linda and let her know what her husband does during his lunch breaks? You can't, Tommy started. Actually, I can. See, when you mess with a man's wife, you open yourself up to consequences, and I'm just getting started. I turned and walked out, leaving Tommy standing there in front of his coworkers and customers, sweating through his expensive shirt. The receptionist was already reaching for her phone, probably to call security, but I was already gone. That afternoon, I drove to Linda Brennan's house on Maple Street. It was a beautiful colonial with a perfect lawn and a minivan in the driveway. Through the front window, I could see children's toys scattered around a comfortable living room. Linda answered the door with a dish towel in her hands and a smile on her face. She was pretty in a wholesome, suburban mom way, the kind of woman who probably packed her husband's lunch every morning and never suspected he was using it as an excuse to meet other women. Mrs. Brennan? My name is Elliot Crane. I think we need to talk about your husband. The smile faded from her face. I'm sorry. What is this about? Your husband Tommy has been having an affair with my wife Sarah. I have photos, hotel records, and text messages. I thought you should know. She stared at me for a long moment, then stepped back and invited me in. We sat in her pristine living room while her twin daughters played upstairs, and I showed her everything I'd collected. The photos from the club, the hotel registrations, the text messages to multiple women. Linda looked at each piece of evidence carefully, her face getting paler with each revelation. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. I suspected something, she said quietly. He's been working late, taking long lunches, being secretive with his phone, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. I know how it feels. How long have you known? About a week. I'm filing for divorce. She nodded slowly. Thank you for coming to me directly. A lot of men wouldn't have done that. You deserve to know. And your daughters deserve better than a father who lies and cheats. After I left Linda's house, I drove to the dental office where Sarah worked. Through the window, I could see her at the reception desk, probably fielding questions from her coworkers about the divorce papers she'd been served an hour ago. I didn't go in. I just sat in my van and watched her squirm, knowing that her comfortable little secret was now public knowledge, knowing that she was probably calling Tommy in a panic, not knowing that Tommy was dealing with his own crisis at home. My phone rang. It was Sarah. You bastard, she said without preamble. You served me at work? In front of everyone? You cheated on me in public. Seems fair. And what did you say to Tommy? He's acting crazy, talking about leaving town. I told him the truth, that he's a cheating piece of garbage who's about to lose everything just like you are. Elliot, we can work this out. We don't have to do this. Yes, we do. You made that choice when you decided our marriage wasn't worth your loyalty. Now you get to live with the consequences. I'll fight you on everything. The house, the business, everything. Good luck with that. I've got photos, video, hotel records, and bank statements showing you stole $3,000 to finance your affair. My lawyer thinks I've got a pretty good case. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "You're going to regret this, Elliot. I'll make sure of it. Looking forward to it." I hung up and drove back to Derek's apartment, feeling better than I had in weeks. Sarah and Tommy thought they could destroy my life without consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Word travels fast in a small town, and by the end of the week, everyone knew about Sarah's affair and our divorce. The reactions were mixed, but mostly in my favor. Our friends, the couples we'd socialized with for years, were shocked and supportive. Sarah's coworkers at the dental office were gossiping about the drama. Even strangers were looking at me with sympathy when I went to the grocery store or the bank. But Sarah wasn't going down without a fight. She hired her own lawyer and started spreading her own version of events. According to her, I was a workaholic who'd neglected our marriage and driven her into the arms of another man. She painted herself as a lonely, neglected wife who'd made a mistake but deserved forgiveness and half of everything I'd worked for. The problem with her story was that I had evidence and she had excuses. Jim called me on Friday morning with an update. She's asking for spousal support, half the business and half the house. Her lawyer claims she's entitled to compensation for 15 years of supporting your career. Supporting my career? She worked part-time at a dental office and spent our money on affairs. I know. That's why we're going to court. Judge Patterson is hearing preliminary motions next Wednesday. You need to be there. That weekend, I decided to pay a visit to some of our mutual friends. Mark and Jennifer Collins had been our closest couple friends for 10 years. We'd gone on vacations together, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, shared holidays when our families were out of town. I found Mark in his garage, working on an old motorcycle he'd been restoring for years. "Elliot, how are you holding up, man?" "Better than expected. You heard about Sarah?" "Yeah, Jennifer told me. I'm sorry, dude. That sucks." We talked for a while about the divorce, about how I was coping, about what I planned to do next. Mark was supportive and understanding, exactly what I'd expected from a good friend. Then Jennifer came out of the house with beers for all of us, and the conversation shifted. "Elliot, I have to ask, did you really have Sarah followed? Because that's what she's telling people." "I didn't have her followed. My brother saw her at his bar and sent me a video. There's a difference. She's saying you were stalking her, that you threatened Tommy at his workplace, that you're trying to destroy her reputation." I looked at Jennifer carefully. "Do you believe that?" "I don't know what to believe. Sarah's been my friend for 15 years too. She says you've been emotionally abusive, that you controlled all the money and never let her have any independence." "Jennifer, I showed you the bank statements. She spent $3,000 in 1 month on her affair. How is that me controlling the money?" "Maybe she felt like she had to hide her spending because you were so controlling about finances." I realized what was happening. Sarah had gotten to Jennifer first, told her sob story about being trapped in a loveless marriage with a controlling husband. Jennifer wanted to believe her friend was the victim, not the villain. "So, you think I deserve to be cheated on?" I think marriages are complicated, and there are always two sides to every story. Mark looked uncomfortable. "Jen, maybe we shouldn't—" "No, it's fine," I said. "I understand. Sarah's been your friend for 15 years, and she's telling you I'm the bad guy. But ask yourself this. If I was really controlling and abusive, why didn't she leave me? Why did she sneak around instead of asking for a divorce? And why did she steal our money to pay for hotels with her boyfriend? Jennifer didn't have an answer for that, but I could see she wasn't convinced. Sarah had poisoned the well, turned our mutual friends against me with lies and half-truths. I finished my beer and left, knowing I'd probably lost Mark and Jennifer as friends. By Monday, I'd heard from 3 other couples who were staying neutral in our divorce, which meant they believed Sarah's version of events. It hurt, but it also motivated me. Sarah wanted to play dirty? Fine. I had one more card to play. On Tuesday night, I drove to the Mirage Club. Derek was working, and the place was busy with the usual crowd of divorced dads and cheating spouses. I found a table in the back and waited. At 10:30, Sarah walked in wearing a black dress that cost more than my monthly truck payment. She was with her sister Lisa and 2 other women I didn't recognize. They got a table near the dance floor and ordered a round of expensive cocktails. At 11:15, Tommy showed up. He looked nervous, constantly checking his phone and looking around like he expected trouble. He joined Sarah's table, and within minutes they were all over each other, just like in Derek's video. But I wasn't there to watch them make out. I was there to document the final piece of my case. At 11:45, Sarah and Tommy left together, heading for the parking lot. I followed at a distance and watched them get into his BMW. Instead of driving to a hotel, though, they went to Sarah's sister's apartment complex. Lisa had given them a key to her place so they could have somewhere private to meet. Sarah's own sister was helping her cheat on me, providing a safe house for their affair while Sarah cried to our friends about being a victim of emotional abuse. I took photos of them going into the apartment building, then drove home to Derek's place. The next morning, I called Jim and told him what I'd discovered. "Her sister's been helping her?" Jim asked. "That's perfect. It shows premeditation, planning, family support for the affair. Judge Patterson is going to love this." Wednesday morning, we met at the courthouse for the preliminary hearing. Sarah was there with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Karen Walsh, who specialized in representing cheating wives. Sarah had dressed conservatively, navy blue suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, trying to look like a respectable victim instead of a cheating spouse. Judge Patterson was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd been handling family court for 20 years. She'd seen every sob story and every lie, and she didn't have patience for either. Karen Walsh went first, painting Sarah as a neglected wife who'd made a mistake but deserved compassion and financial security. She talked about Sarah's years of sacrifice, supporting my business, managing our household, being taken for granted. Then Jim stood up and methodically destroyed every claim. He presented the bank statements showing Sarah's excessive spending, the hotel records showing 6 different affairs, the photos and videos of her public displays with Tommy, the evidence that her own sister had been helping her cheat. "Your Honor, Mrs. Crane claims she was neglected and taken for granted. But the evidence shows she was living a double life, stealing marital funds to finance multiple affairs and enlisting family members to help her deceive her husband. This isn't a case of a lonely wife making a mistake. This is a case of calculated infidelity and financial fraud." Judge Patterson looked at the evidence for a long time. Then she looked at Sarah, who was crying quietly into a tissue. "Mrs. Crane, do you dispute any of these bank records or hotel registrations?" Sarah's lawyer whispered something to her, then answered. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that she had an affair, but I didn't ask about affairs, counselor. I asked about the financial records. Did Mrs. Crane spend $3,000 of marital funds on personal expenses without her husband's knowledge?" Another whispered conversation. "Yes, Your Honor, but..." "And did she register at hotels using false names with a man who is not her husband?" "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Patterson nodded. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm denying the request for temporary spousal support. Mrs. Crane can remain in the marital home until the final hearing, but all joint accounts are frozen effective immediately. Mr. Crane will pay reasonable household expenses directly to creditors, but Mrs. Crane will have no access to marital funds." Sarah's face went white. Without access to our joint accounts and credit cards, she couldn't finance her lifestyle or her legal fees. Her lawyer looked stunned. Furthermore, Judge Patterson continued, I'm ordering both parties to refrain from wasting marital assets. That means no large purchases, no unusual expenses, and no transfers of property without court approval. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright morning sun. Sarah and her lawyer were huddled together on the courthouse steps, probably discussing how they were going to pay for her defense without access to our money. Jim was grinning. That went better than I expected. Judge Patterson saw right through the victim act. What happens next? We wait for the final hearing, which should be in about 6 weeks. In the meantime, Sarah's going to realize how expensive divorce lawyers are when you can't use your husband's money to pay for them. I drove back to Derek's apartment feeling vindicated. Sarah had tried to destroy my reputation and take half of everything I'd worked for. Instead, she was facing the consequences of her choices for the first time in her life. But I wasn't done yet. I had one final surprise for my cheating wife and her boyfriend. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November. By then, Sarah had been living in our house for 6 weeks without access to any money except her part-time salary from the dental office. She'd had to sell some of her expensive clothes and jewelry to pay her lawyer, and the stress was showing. Tommy, meanwhile, was dealing with his own problems. Linda had filed for divorce and was seeking full custody of their daughters. His car dealership was suffering because word had gotten around about his affairs, and several prominent families in town had taken their business elsewhere. But I had one more surprise planned for both of them. The night before the hearing, I called Derek at the bar. Is Sarah there tonight? Yeah, she's been coming in every Tuesday and Thursday since the accounts got frozen. Can't afford the expensive places anymore. Is she alone? No, Tommy's with her. They're at their usual table in the back. Perfect. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I drove to the Mirage Club and parked across the street, just like I had 2 months ago when this whole thing started. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't the shocked, betrayed husband discovering his wife's affair. Tonight, I was a man with a plan. I walked into the club and found Sarah and Tommy at a corner table, sharing a pitcher of beer and looking miserable. Sarah had lost weight, and her hair looked like she'd been cutting it herself to save money. Tommy was wearing a wrinkled shirt and had dark circles under his eyes. They looked up when I approached their table, both tensing like they expected a fight. Relax, I said, pulling up a chair. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to talk before tomorrow's hearing. We have nothing to say to you, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Actually, I think you do. See, I've been thinking about our situation, and I realized something. We're all losing here. You two are miserable, I'm miserable, Linda's miserable, your kids are miserable. Nobody's winning. Tommy leaned forward. What are you getting at? I'm getting at a solution that works for everyone. Sarah, you want out of our marriage and you want to be with Tommy. Tommy, you want to be with Sarah and you want to avoid paying Linda massive alimony and child support. And I want to move on with my life without spending the next year fighting in court. Sarah looked suspicious. What kind of solution? I pulled out a manila envelope and set it on the table. I've had my lawyer draw up a settlement agreement. Sarah gets a clean divorce, no spousal support, but she keeps her car and her personal belongings. I keep the house, the business, and all the debt. We split our savings account 50-50, which comes to about $1,200 each. That's it? Sarah asked. After 15 years of marriage? After 15 years of marriage and 2 months of you cheating on me with our joint credit cards? Yeah, that's it. But here's the interesting part. This offer expires at midnight tonight. Tomorrow in court, I'm asking for everything. Tommy was reading over the settlement papers. What about me? How does this help me? I smiled. Well, Tommy, that depends on whether you want Linda to see these photos. I pulled out a second envelope and spread its contents on the table. Photos of Tommy with Jennifer Martinez at a restaurant downtown. Photos of him with Amy Chen at a movie theater. Photos of him with Lisa Rodriguez at a hotel that wasn't the Riverside Inn. You see, while I was investigating your affair with my wife, I discovered you've been cheating on Linda with at least 4 different women over the past year. Sarah wasn't your first affair, and she wasn't your last. She was just the one that got caught. Sarah stared at the photos, then at Tommy. You told me I was the only one. You said you'd never cheated before. Sarah! Tommy started. You said you loved me. You said you wanted to leave Linda for me. I do love you. Bullshit. Sarah grabbed one of the photos showing Tommy kissing Amy Chen. This was taken last week while I was sitting at home with no money, worrying about our future together. The table erupted in accusations and denials. Sarah screaming at Tommy for lying to her, Tommy trying to explain that the other women didn't mean anything, both of them realizing that their great romance was built on lies and selfishness. I sat back and watched them destroy each other, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. After 10 minutes of shouting, they both turned to me. You planned this, Sarah said. You knew about the other women when you came over here. Of course I did. I've known for weeks, but I wanted you to hear it from him, in his own words, so you'd understand exactly what kind of man you threw our marriage away for. Tommy was sweating. What do you want? I want you both to sign this settlement agreement tonight. Sarah gets her freedom and a clean start. Tommy gets to keep his other affairs secret from Linda, at least until after their divorce is final. And I get to move on with my life without spending another day thinking about either of you. And if we don't sign? Sarah asked. Then tomorrow in court, I present all of this evidence to Judge Patterson. She sees the hotel records, the bank statements, the photos of Tommy with multiple women. Sarah, you get nothing in the divorce, and you get to explain to everyone why you destroyed our marriage for a serial cheater. Tommy, Linda's lawyer gets copies of everything, and you lose your kids and pay alimony for the next 15 years. They looked at each other, then at the photos scattered across the table, then at the settlement agreement. This is blackmail, Tommy said. No, this is consequences. You both made choices, and now you get to live with them. The only question is whether you want to live with them publicly or privately. Sarah picked up the settlement papers and read through them again. 15 years of marriage, and this is what it comes down to? Signing papers in a bar while my boyfriend's other girlfriends stare at me from photographs? You made it come down to this when you decided to cheat instead of asking for a divorce. She signed the papers with a pen Derek brought over from the bar. Tommy signed as a witness, his hand shaking slightly. There, Sarah said, sliding the papers back to me. We're done. 15 years, and we're done. We've been done for months, Sarah. This just makes it official. I stood up and put the papers back in the envelope. For what it's worth, I hope you two are happy together. You deserve each other. I walked out of the Mirage Club for the last time, leaving my ex-wife and her cheating boyfriend to figure out their future together. Outside, the November air was cold and clean, and I felt like I could breathe freely for the first time in months. The next morning, Jim filed the settlement agreement with the court. Judge Patterson reviewed it, confirmed that both parties had signed voluntarily, and granted the divorce. 15 years of marriage ended with a 10-minute hearing and a stamp on legal documents. I drove home, to my house now, not our house, and found Sarah's things gone and her key on the kitchen counter. She'd left behind the expensive clothes and jewelry she'd bought with our credit cards, taking only what she'd owned before our marriage and what she'd bought with her own money. The house felt empty but peaceful. I made coffee in my kitchen, sat at my table, and read the newspaper without worrying about anyone else's mood or plans or secrets.